With 22 years of heading up an independent agency under his belt, DiMassimo Goldstein's Mark DiMassimo believes traditional advertising's days are numbered. Of course, he would say that. A long ago JWT creative who logged years at holding companies says he saw the light when he realized agencies fundamentally failed to meet clients' needs. Today, he says it's all about brand building. I'm Brian Breaker, editor of AdAge, and you are listening to AdLib. DiMassimo joins me today to share his unique view on the advertising landscape. He is the quintessential hype man for the independent agency. We also discuss using advertising to fight the opioid epidemic and why, for the first time in his life, he finds himself agreeing with Martin Sorrell.
What experience do you want them to have? Like, when you think about this thing? Like,
what experience do I want my listeners to have?
Yeah, like, what do you want them? Why should they tune in?
I want them to be entertained and informed, inspired, possibly scared.
Okay, yeah. All right.
I think they are probably already a little scared.
So they feel like they need to listen, and they it might be dangerous not to listen.
If they miss a single episode of this podcast.
All right.
They're
See, I'm such an egg. I want my brief, right? Yeah. Now I've got my brief. Okay.
You got your brief.
I've got to be entertaining and interesting.
And who are you? You're Mark DiMassimo, Chief of DiMassimo Goldstein. Welcome to the AdLib podcast.
Ryan, it's great to see you. It's great to be here.
It's lovely to see you. We're here to inspire.
And we are seeing each other.
We are
the people need to know that.
Making eye contact.
We really
across a kids card table, folding table.
A not so impressive table.
It's a shoestring budget here, and you can change that, advertisers, if you care to sponsor us. Welcome to the podcast. Well, first, let's start with the basics. DiMassimo Goldstein, what is that? You're an independent agency, 22 years old.
You know a lot about this business. You know a lot about my business. You're exactly right. We are an independent agency in New York that I founded in 1996. So we're 22 years young. Even though we're 22 years old, we have not had the same year over and over again because we work with growth stage, turnaround, innovative businesses. So our clients are constantly driving us to embrace change.
Well, I don't think you have a choice in the current climate to embrace change. Okay, so who are these clients? I know.
Let me give you a few because right now we have 16, and then this is not about being self-promotional.
Yeah, we're not going to. This is not the DiMassimo Goldstein hour, but
so you can understand. So we believe it's a direct-to-consumer, choice-filled world, and that people are actually out there in the marketplace trying to get inspired to do great things and the right things. Yeah. We want clients to do that. So some of our top clients right now are Salesforce.org. So Salesforce, one of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Offices in this building.
Yes, they have the largest tower in San Francisco. Yep. But Salesforce.org actually works with .orgs, and they really help drive. They really help drive the not-for-profit economy, and they help a lot of people. So we're really proud that we're working with them, and we're all about their brand and getting their story out. TradeStation's a fintech company that went from, we've been working with them for 7 years, sort of a small competitor to Charles Schwab and folks like that. But now the fastest growing broker into crypto, programmatic trading, and all of that sort of stuff. Very excited about them. And I'll mention the Bronx Zoo Wildlife Conservation Society.
What a cool client.
So fun.
So you said the words direct to consumer. You say those words a lot. You said those words a few times before we turned on the mics. When you say direct to consumer, what do you mean? Really, what does that look like?
Yeah. So when I founded the agency in 1996, I had this thought.
Were you a holding company refugee at that point?
Right before I started DiMassimo Goldstein, I was creative director at Kirschenbaum Bond and Partners.
Richard is the one who introduced us.
Yes, yep. Which was an amazing experience, and we were challenging the holding companies. But before that, I was at J. Walter Thompson, Y&R, started at BBDO and their direct group at BBDO, And I went on to be this integrated guy. I was working from the brand and advertising end. But I had this early experience of direct to consumer, and I saw technology making everything more and more direct to consumer all the time. And I thought, man, when they turn to agencies, they always get the folks who don't know from brands, right? Who don't know how to build brands. And I thought, wow, we could be the agency that actually builds brands for this direct to consumer world. But for 20 years, I couldn't really say that because agency people always heard direct marketing. Oh, I get performance marketing, direct marketing. And it isn't that. It's actually building brands and businesses in a direct-to-consumer world. Dollar Shave Club, for example. All these platforms. Uber, what it's done to driving. Airbnb, what it's done to hotels. I mean, I could go on and on, but I will not.
But how does that? So direct-to-consumer in some ways means knocking the agencies out of the way.
Well, look, absolutely. If we are also agents, and we're in the middle. And famously, about 10 years ago, all the folks at Google got together and they had a strategic discussion about whether it was time to get rid of agencies or whether they should work with us. And thank God, and those guys who started Google, they decided it would be better to work with us for now. But any middle person, any middle professional, we're all middleware that can be pushed out of the way.
So,
and we got to figure out how we add value.
How do you add value?
Great,
or how does
great
one?
Question.
Not even necessarily
so look,
you specifically.
In a world where everybody has these teched up direct to consumer expectations, like I want it to be instant, I want choice, I want the service I want. I live in a world of choice. You in order to respond to that, you need, first of all, your agency to understand those expectations. Those people are choosing both an experience, and they've got all kinds of choices, but they're also choosing what club to join. I mean, that's why it's also a subscription world now, right? And we've heard about that with Amazon Prime and on and on and on, and Netflix. So in part, it's people piecing together their own sort of service worlds. So what inspires me? What gives me the experience I want? What clubs, in a sense, what brands do I identify with that I want to make part of my life? Am I a Netflix person or a Hulu person, or is it just worth it to put those two together? You need agencies that really can think those things through. And, business and brand experience delivered through product, service, and then advertising, marketing, all of that, that's the hierarchy today. And so I think, one thing that large agencies that grew up and built large factories for creating advertising, one thing they're suffering, one thing the holding companies are suffering with right now is these legacy agencies that were built for a world where the advertising drove the brand positioning. And that's just not the case anymore.
The case today is it's incumbent on the advertiser or the agencies to help build the brands themselves. Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm seeing it again and again where your chief marketing officer better get promoted to chief growth officer and own the product, service, content, and brand, or someone else will. And then your chief marketing officer will be reporting to a chief growth officer or a chief product officer. Everybody has access to the opinions of others through consumer reviews and rating sites and all of that in every category. And so the product experience that you give and the story you tell around it through content, through PR, through social media, and yes, through advertising and marketing, it has to all really hang together. So advertising is just a lot less important than it used to be. It just is.
And so this need for brand building and the whole at the holding company level has made room for the consultancies to move in.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where when I look at the independents that like us, I'm knocking, it's not wood, but I'm knocking it anyway.
Like plastic.
That like us are thriving. They are brand consultancies at the core, but they're activating brand consultancies, whether they're activating through social or in an integrated way like we are. it's really or whether they're innovation shops. So that's why innovation shops have grown up, because the truth is, what are we going to be? What service are we going to offer? What's the meaning for that has become a much more important question than what do we say about it.
So is the traditional advertising agency, as you see it, the writing's on the wall?
Look, I think there are massive global companies that have all the problems of scale, and they also they probably need agencies. What's that?
And advantages.
And advantages of scale, right? And they'll need ways of dealing with those scale problems. I don't claim to be an expert on that. I think that world is troubled both on the client side and on the agency side. It's really hurting now. I love that Sir Martin and I, for the first time, agree. Right now, he's saying the same things I've been saying for a long time.
The holding companies are broken.
Right.
Now that he's on the other side.
Right. He's like, now that I'm outside, I've realized that no, you were part of the problem. You profited from the problem. You understand the problem really well because you were on the inside, and now you know how to compete.
That's what George Soros did too, in a way.
Hell yeah, hell yeah.
What do you think is going to happen with WPP specifically, and then the holding model more broadly? I mean, this is pure speculation. Obviously, you don't.
Yeah, I think. Look, they compete as public companies, and their stories aren't great compared to the tech companies that are driven by pure tech stories, right? So, and they're also holding a lot of what they used to consider cash cow assets, which are actually weighing them down now. They've also got a lot of new model. I mean, they're buying into independents. They're trying to integrate them. They're trying to make them matter for scale. I would not be surprised if we see some divestitures of mature assets and that sort of stuff.
A lot of people are saying that, for sure.
And meanwhile, I know these guys are trying. I mean, I hear all the time from folks who would love to get people like me and agencies like ours inside in order to give clients the experience they've been leaving for. So but what they keep telling me is there are fewer and fewer things to buy. So,
would you sell?
If the answer was yes, I'd already be sold. No, I just, what, if wherever I am, the next 3 years of my life are always too important to me. And I'm not going to be the richest guy in the cemetery, but I do well enough and I've done well enough that if I love my job, I'm going to be okay. And so my priority is to keep growing this place, because I'm giving other people this experience of working in a focused, inspiring, less problematic environment. I see what it means in their lives too, and we're not for every client, but we play an important role in the lives of our clients as well too. I want to perpetuate that.
Talk about then what you learned at BBDO, JWT, what you saw there that you chose not to replicate. I mean, you said you did see a need for that sort of brand building skill set.
Yeah.
But what did you see that you didn't want?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Without fail, the people at the top of the large agencies I worked for, and I'm forever grateful I got to work closely with these people. Without fail, they were really smart and really good, and frankly, not unlike. Very often, they're the same people that were running smaller independent agencies before. I mean, we could name a lot of names. I won't, but a lot of the top of the biggest agencies are actually the result of acquisitions or just hiring people whose smaller agencies failed. Right. So at that level, there's similar thinking, but I've seen people go into those situations and then the problems they have to solve, and the genius they go in with, thinking about brands, orchestrating teams, really innovating through the creative and innovating around the creative too. They get worn down by the problems of how do I keep people out of this meeting? Everybody wants to sell their thing in the meeting. So it becomes how do I keep this all from going south and just try to be a little bit better from other people who compete? the other thing that I found, and look, my experience is a little old, but everybody tells me that the beautiful, pure brand planning environment that I experienced at Kirschenbaum, which was like at the time it was Kirschenbaum and Chiat, it was never really replicated very well at most large agencies. As a creative director at J. Walter Thompson, I was really a better planner than a creative director. That was true of just about every creative director there. We didn't have planners, so we had to be right about the brand, and therefore the creative to some extent suffered, sometimes to a great extent. Whereas in the independents, you have strategic thinkers working in lockstep with creatives, sometimes in our place with media people as well, with technologists, but you don't have to be your own strategist. You get to connect your strategic mind to somebody who's really focused on that. And it's in a size team where if people aren't adding to the conversation, they're not in the conversation. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by the problems of scale. Like problems of scale, it's like we have to find some way to engage all of these people all over the world, even though that's going to dilute the quality of this conversation. We don't have that problem. I mean, we have it on the client side to some extent as our clients get bigger, but we help create this skunk works that then helps infect and inspire the rest of that larger team.
In fact, I like that. What are your clients' pain points right now? What are they coming to you looking for help on?
I think I'll say how they define the problem, and then I'll talk about the changes that are behind the problem. But without fail, the client needs to both build revenue, like accelerate the growth of revenue, and do it in a way that, I don't know brand that builds the brand at the same time, brand syntonic, or leverages the brand or builds the brand at the same time. Without fail, there are all kinds of pressures to sacrifice the long term of the brand for short term sales. Different organizations have different kinds of pressures, but they all have these pressures. So without fail, they own this problem. If they don't solve the revenue problem in the short run, they're out. They don't get to build the brand. If they do it in a way that doesn't actually build the value of the brand, it's going to stop working, and then they're going to be out. And with very few exceptions, when they turn to agencies, the agencies all want to own one side of that problem or the other. So they don't have somebody to step up and say, yes, I will own the integration of both sides of that problem. They've got performance marketing agencies that are all about, let's just hyper-personalize, let's automate, let's use programmatic, let's give a different offer to everyone. We don't really care if when customers get together, they speak the same language about us as well. We just need to maximize the amount of sales. And then they've got brand people who often don't know how to create a brand platform that actually can drive all of that stuff. Innovation, experience, product, promotion, and all of that. So the client has to be the orchestrator. When they come to us, they want somebody who can sit with them at the table and be an expert in integrating those things.
Mm-hmm. Right. Talk about your work in the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids, which I think is interesting. You're using advertising to fight the opioid epidemic.
Yes.
Why that cause, for starters?
Well, first off, if I go back to the 90s when I first got involved with them, both the woman who would become my wife, Jill Kingsley, now Jill Kingsley DiMassimo, and I got involved with the organization serendipitously at the same time. She took a job there working with all of the great agencies on developing what has become the largest single subject public service campaign ever. So she was on the inside working with agencies. Let me tell you, I learned a lot about it, how agencies present and what differentiates agencies from that. And simultaneously,
can you give an example of what you?
Well, I mean, at the time, So you may know this. I think we've talked about this before. We don't pitch. We win and we don't pitch. We're one of the fastest growing private companies in America for each of the last 5 years, and we do not do creative pitches. Well, back then, BBH entered this market, and I got to meet and have some breakfast with John Hegarty and all of that. But they would say we don't pitch at the time. We don't do creative pitches, and that was a mystery for me. What did that mean? Well, at the partnership, both Jill and I joined their creative review committee at the time, which is now the creative development board, and I'm the chairman of it as of this year. But after 20-year apprenticeship, right? But I saw several times BBH present, and they presented what they presented at the time when they pitched. And in fact, what I saw was when you focus on ideas and not on execution, you're focusing the client on the highest leverage thing you can bring rather than all these distracting images and pictures, one. And two, you're allowing them to imagine whatever they're going to imagine. Frankly, you're going to work with them for months to figure out exactly how to execute this stuff. So when you go in with, so they didn't bring in nothing. They brought in strategic thinking and they brought in platforms. And they said it wasn't creative. And so what I've realized is, first off, clients are buying an experience when they buy an agency, and a lot of agency experiences are really awful. And so we'll basically say, look, you're buying an experience. You're not buying one campaign. If this goes well, we're going to work on many things together, right? So let's start with a project. We need to commit that much, so you need to commit that much. We're never going to tie your hands and ask you to sign a 2-year contract or anything like that, because we're going to earn our way. But let's start with an initial project that assumes it's going to go on. And let's talk about ideas and how it'll be to work together. And we find that works. Mm-hmm. So I meeting all these other agencies while working on anti-drug advertising gave me a window into the different cultures. You know, I got to see folks from Crispin present several times when they were the hottest agency in the country, and they set up their work less, they defended their work less, and they were so cool when they got direction. You know, that I would see these other people come in and talk and talk and talk and then defend and defend and defend. And they were like, oh, whatever the point was, they were like, oh, yeah, oh, cool, all right. Mm-hmm. You know? And then, you know, later they would decide if to integrate. They gave you the feeling of confidence. Mm-hmm. And this is what I learned. So Jill went on to become a client. She went to be, you know, one of the heads of marketing at Tommy Hilfiger. And I'd say, you know, what do the agencies that really work for you give you? And she said, you know, as a client, you're afraid. You know, you can't do it. You can't force the agency to do it, and you don't know how to make it work, even if you're smart and good. So a confident agency, confident enough to listen, but confident enough to support, it's so reassuring. You know? And I was like, so how would they be confident? You know, and she'd say, well, there's this one guy who will say at some point in a meeting, this is our 7,503rd commercial we've ever done. We'll get this right. Mm-hmm. You know, things like that. So
that's great. You have someone on the inside feeding you pro tips.
Listen to the client experience. It's all that we focus on. I mean, I'm a creative guy. I care about creative. I care about thinking. I care about brand planning.
What about data?
We are very teched up and data oriented because in the direct to consumer world, our mix is 75% digital, and that includes email. I mean, we optimize, but how do you integrate what you're learning from your data with what you're trying to build for your brand and your brand experience? That's the challenge the client lives with, and compromise is ultimate failure. And so agencies that are either data focused or brand focused tend to sell what they do. They pull in their direction and they sell against the other guys, and clients are stuck in the middle being pulled in two directions. It's super uncomfortable, and it makes them feel more responsible and less confident than they want to feel. So we're deeply into the data, but we got to translate it into insight, and we have to explain how it fits within what you're trying to build as a brand, because not all data it should immediately trigger a computer to pull a trigger, because that can undermine the brand. And there are other ways to sell that'll work better.
So back to fighting opioids.
So back to fighting. So yeah, I mean, this is my. Those guys back in the 80s.
It wasn't about opioids back then.
No, it wasn't about opioids back then. But those guys who got together back in the 80s, from Johnson & Johnson, from media companies, and from the big advertising agencies back then, Alan Rosenshine, the inventor of Omnicom, the chairman emeritus of BBDO today, was one of these founders. They had this perfect storm of society is really worried about drugs. The government gets that they're worried, and industry could come together and really have a solution, because the media landscape meant advertising could really do something about it. And they created the partnership, and they did amazing things. And they slayed crack, and then they slayed ecstasy, and as new drugs came up, they went out there and they created effective campaigns.
Well, how do you create an effective campaign to fight drugs? Basically, it's a human behavior that is never going to go away. And B, kids are not receptive to advertising, less so now than ever before.
Yeah, so you're exactly right, and that's what's changed. So today, that worked for the media environment of then. It doesn't work for the media environment of today. And so today, first off, whereas before it was media agencies and advertising agencies, now it's the core digital firms, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters, et cetera, and the rest of media, plus media agencies. And yes, it's ad agencies, but it's also the deep integrated digital agencies as well. So it's a bigger coalition, because that's what fits the world today. And right now, what we're focused on with is now the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. And what that means, and that may change over time, who knows, but our focus is on helping parents who are on the front line with their kids. So we're no longer out there advertising to kids saying stay off drugs.
Right.
What we are is providing services in a direct-to-parent way, right? And we're leveraging these partnerships with Google and Facebook. So I say all this because, one, it's working, but two, the government's not spending money on getting help for parents. They're not spending money right now on prevention. Maybe they will. But if you're in a tech firm, if you're in a media firm, if you're in an agency, if you're in a digital or interactive firm, my message is this is our generation's problem. And I know you're working on guns as well. Add that too.
Yeah,
but I mean this is one of the biggest social behavior problems, right? Of our generation, and step up. It's a whole new thing now. If you're interested, a lot of folks have had personal experiences. Reach out to me. I'm not hard to find in social media. We need people to step up and be part of this, and we've got some great people on this creative review board now. Amazing thinkers. Head of or top innovation guy from Apple. Great, chief creative officers from agencies. It's a great thing.
Great. What else is on your mind?
Behavior. I mean, people are having trouble. So finally, I don't think it's just me. We found through our research that folks are having trouble, like with technology addiction.
Yeah, we saw that in Apple's keynote, or in Tim Cook's keynote at the Apple Festival earlier this month.
Tim Cook is right again.
Yeah.
So we are all, look, how many of us are working on attracting people's attention, distracting people from what they're paying attention to, engaging them for as long as possible, getting them to click for as much as possible. We're all out there mastering the art of diverting people's attention and casting a spell over their behavior. Simultaneously, there's an enormous amount of choice. So my belief, I think values have to come above business. And I think values ultimately will drive business success. But I think you have to align the two. And I believe we can help people solve this choice problem. We can help people control themselves a bit more so they can get more satisfaction out of life. And if we do that, the brands that do that are ultimately going to do better. So, I just think this is our core measure. We want to work for inspiring action brands that help people form more empowering habits and make more inspiring decisions. That's what we do.
That's hard to monetize, I would imagine.
It's because people are desperate for solutions like this now because of what's happened. I really believe it's a big part of what's driving this direct-to-consumer marketplace. I think the brands that give you a better experience, like, do I feel better afterwards? This is why Facebook and Apple are doing this. They realize that there's a limit on just pure behavior. If people feel miserable, if people don't feel empowered, they are going to go elsewhere, and there will be competition. You were talking about the benefits of scale. The benefits of scale don't extend to being able to make people miserable forevermore and not losing them.
Right.
It won't happen. And not only that, government will rise up too. People will rise up through their governments as well.
Well,
so we have to be out there creating. I'm a challenger. I don't want to do it through government. I want to create alternatives and support alternatives that give people incredible experiences. And I also would love to help brands, like Apple and Google do it as well. But I think we have to give people better experiences of themselves, feeling empowered.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an empowering place to leave things.
Terrific.
This was excellent, and it sounds like you're doing good work. So
feels good.
Keep it up. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Right.
Great to be here.
I want to thank Mark DiMassimo from DiMassimo Goldstein for joining me today. I am Brian Breaker, editor of AdAge. You are listening to AdLib. Be sure to subscribe to us at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Listen to us on Spotify. Give us lots of stars. Read us at adage.com. This episode was produced by Alfred Mascaroni, and we will see you next week. Or you will hear us next week. We won't see you. We never see you. All right, that's enough.